As you know from the agenda, we've got a lot to go through today. We're going to have a busy meeting. You'll know by now that access to speak is through the chat bar. Can I ask you to do that, please? I've said to you before, I can't see you all. There's probably going to be up towards of 50 people at the meeting today, so I'm unable to see everyone at the same time. Please do not use the chat bar for anything else, unless, of course, you want a point of order. Please will you do that? And at all other times, please make sure that you're muted, because obviously background noise can be a bit distracting. The other thing is that, and normally what we're doing, if there's an agreement with the recommendations, that silence is golden, unless of course there's any amendments, and we'll deal with them as and when if they are. Just two further quick points. For those members who are part of the Municipal Bank, we've got two meetings directly after this. One's the AGM and the other one is the normal Municipal Bank meeting. And before I start, it's just to say congratulations to Councillor London, his appointment as leader of the main opposition group, and of course his new team. And with that now, we could get started. Andrew, first of all, is there any apologies, or can you give a list of substitute members, please?
Yes, Convener. The only apology I've received to date is from Councillor Callum Curry, and there's no substitute indicated.
Okay. Members, is there any other apologies to give to Andrew at this point? No, there's none. Moving on now to agenda item 1, declaration of interests. Is there any declaration of interests?
Yes, Convener, Bob Burgess. I'd like to declare on agenda 9, I'm a member of the Lanarkshire Evaluation Board.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else?
Chair, it's Gilbert Pat O'Rourke. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 26 as a family member is involved.
Okay. Declaration from Tom Castles. Tom?
Similar to Bob, the Joint Evaluation Board.
Okay.
Chair, Councillor Shields is the Evaluation Board as well.
Okay.
Chair, Councillor Redden is the Evaluation Board as well.
Okay. We're getting a run of it now. Thank you. Anybody else?
Bob, item 17, just to let you know that I am no longer working with NLL. Thank you.
Okay. Right, last one. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 2A and 2B, the normal reports. They're here for your approval. Can we agree with the reports, members? Are you happy to agree with them? Yeah. Okay. Agenda item 3. This is the first of 3 HR reports coming to you. A significant policy on the first 2 items. Fiona, you want to take us through the paper? Fiona, you're on mute. Yep, you got it. Okay. I know you're trying desperate. Yep, that's you. That's you. Good. Oh, you're away again. Try one more time, Fiona.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yep. We're okay now. Okay, go ahead, Fiona.
Okay.
Fiona.
Okay.
Apologies. Just before you start, Fiona, Councillor
Sure.
Annette Valentine's just declared an interest. It's via the chat bars. If I could just ask Councillor Valentine just to advise the committee of a declaration for completeness, please.
Yes, the Lanarkshire Evaluation Joint Board.
Okay. Thank you for that. Fiona.
Okay, thanks, Convener. So this hopefully is a very straightforward report which provides elected members with an update on the operation of our very successful interim home working scheme following its introduction last year around September. We're seeking at this point an extension to that scheme for a period of 12 months and in essence that is to cover the anticipated period of the full vaccination rollout and a likely return to a more blended model of office and home working over that period of time. Also contained within the report are some minor proposed updates to 2 of our associated HR policies, which align to and support the scheme. So I just want to highlight a few items from the report in support of the request to formally extend this scheme and the associated policies. You'll note in section 1.1.10 of the report that the Council's levels of COVID-related, specifically COVID-related sickness absence are very low and have been very low throughout the period of the pandemic. Now, materially, we believe that the operation of the home working scheme is very much a part of keeping those levels of COVID sickness low. And that's because we know that where there have been significant outbreaks within council, it has been related to staff being in office settings and being in close proximity. So outbreaks within the depot building are a very good example of that. So the extension of this scheme and the continued operation of it all the way through to the full vaccination rollout is very, very important for us, particularly to support our duty of care to keep staff safe and to prevent any further outbreaks. In section 2.1.5 through to 2.1.7, I just also want to highlight the fact that we recognise that move to home working has been a big change for staff. So as part of this scheme, we've worked hard to ensure that we've got relevant supports for staff in place when they're home working during this period. And more than that, we've undertaken a survey to understand the impact that that's having on staff. So you'll see from the results of the survey that they are in the main very positive. So lots of staff reporting the benefits of flexibility in terms of work-life balance. And also, more importantly, there's been a good level of engagement between staff and their line managers. And materially, we've seen no loss of real productivity or performance across the council during the period of the scheme operation. And there's been no increase from an HR perspective in the areas like disciplinary, grievance, or indeed dignity at work. So from our perspective, the scheme is doing the job it should be doing. It's keeping staff safe, but it's also giving them some flexibility and benefits. Throughout the scheme operation and with feedback from trade unions, we anticipate going forward that what staff will probably most value is a bit of a blended model between home working and office working, and we will undertake further surveys over that period of 12 months to understand what's going to work best for staff. So the future working of a permanent home scheme would require a full renegotiation of our core conditions documents. So this is an interim scheme for 12 months. We'll pull together the information and data from the operation of that scheme over the 12 months. And if we are intending to propose a more permanent scheme, we'll bring that back to committee at that time. There are other HR policies that will require to be amended over the operation of this scheme, but they'll be brought forward in turn to committee. So I don't propose to say anything else at that point, but I'm more than happy to take questions.
I've got 2 questions in the chat bar. Sorry. 3. The first one is Annette Valentine, is that for your declaration there? Andrew, can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, that's been dealt with. So the next speaker is Councillor Linden.
Councillor Linden, on you go, Councillor Linden.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thanks very much for your kind comments at the beginning of committee. Thanks, Fiona, for the report. Just a couple of comments for moving to the question. Fiona, great to see the level of trade union engagement on this paper, and in particular, I think it's testament to employees at section 2.1.6. The rate of return of the survey, I think, is genuinely very impressive. You know, in terms of sharing their feedback. Obviously, the feedback is very positive, but in terms of section 2.1.7, some of the kind of emerging areas of concerns, probably the wrong word, but you know, areas of improvement is absolutely how it should be referred to. I wondered how the council were reacting responsively in terms of the extension over the 12 months to address some of these, particularly around you know, additional incurrence of expenses to look at the nature of those. And in particular, that point's been made around mental health and well-being and isolation. You know, obviously something that all of us working from home are experiencing. But how do we support our employees with that particular issue?
So if I take the first one around expenses, we have continued to be in dialogue with staff about expenses and trade unions, as you'll know, about whether staff are indeed incurring significant expenses. And what we'll do, Councillor Linden, is monitor that. And if the trade unions and staff then raise with us the fact that they have got significant further expenses, we will consider in the next iteration of the scheme, or indeed as we operate the scheme, putting in place supports for them in terms of additional expenses. We've had no particular push on that at the moment, and you'll see in the paper that we've offered a cash £100 settlement for the setup of home offices. We've also encouraged staff to access the HMRC tax relief provision, which is £6 per month. But there is a possibility that we may need to operate some kind of scheme where we give them like a weekly allowance, which is equivalent to that £6. So at the moment, you can either claim that through HMRC, or we as an employer can actually pay that for you. So we will consider introducing those kind of elements as we go forward, but there's been no significant push. But it's very much an open scheme, dialogue with the trade unions, dialogue with staff to make sure that we shape it properly as we go forward. On the point of mental health and wellbeing, that seems to ebb and flow that at times, particularly over the winter period, and we do monitor things like Yammer and the kind of feedback we get anecdotally from staff. So the winter period, I think it's been worse, probably for all of us. And the lockdown period's probably been worse in terms of that sense of isolation. But we will put additional mental health supports in through our mental health and wellbeing policy, which you'll note in this report and the next report will be coming to committee in cycle 2. So we've done that very successfully in the past, and we will continue to build on that provision to support staff who are affected by this scheme.
Thank you, Fiona. I think, Councillor Linden, your point about the trade unions, a link that fully support and agree with the recommendations is positive as well. Councillor Burgess, Bob Burgess.
Thank you, Convener. Fiona, just on page 23, well, before I do that, can I put my congratulations into yourself and staff who are obviously under a bit of pressure working from home. But could I ask on the page 23 on paragraph C, technology, as to what technology is actually at home with the staff? And have we got any problems with it? Is it working well, or have we discovered that we've got big problems?
It's working well. There was a lot. I mean, the credit for this, I think, goes to my IT colleagues, in that there was a lot of work put into supporting staff to operate their equipment at home. There were some initial teething problems, and it was more in terms of access to the council's network and whether the council's network actually had the capacity to deal with that number of people accessing through FOBs and from home. But that's largely been resolved, so we haven't had any significant issues. You'll also note that a lot of council equipment was issued to staff, and that included allowing them to come in and get chairs, additional screens, mainly because what we don't want is people to have injuries and sickness as a result of not having a proper home operation set up. So from a technology point of view, it's all working well. We've not had any significant issues at all.
Okay, thanks for that question, Councillor Burgess. I've got Councillor Redding.
Just a quick question, Chair. Thanks. On page 24, Appendix 1, the expenses, it says that business mileage will be calculated from home for those going to a meeting, but for those living out with North Lanarkshire, it can only be claimed from the first boundary of the council area nearest to the employee's home. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that is fairness. So, obviously, if you work from home and claim, if you live, sort of 50 miles, expense claims for that larger than someone who lives within the boundary. So our staff do live within North Lanarkshire. I think our staff rates are something like 70 or 80%. So the policy is designed for fairness and to support the majority of staff, because the outlying number of staff who are in that position. So it's to make sure it's equitable and fair.
Okay. Question for Councillor Castles.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 13, 2.1.8. I suppose the assumption would be, it mentions childcare difficulties. I take it my assumption would be that they would virtually all be COVID related due to the schools not fully attendance and restrictions on travel. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think obviously with kids not being at school, you know, in normal circumstances, people would have better childcare arrangements, whether that be through family or indeed children being back at school. So we don't anticipate going forward that'll be a major issue, but I think it has been an issue genuinely for some staff to try and have, you know, meetings when they've got young kids running about. So it's been difficult, I think, but it's not a material issue, I think, going forward for the operation of the scheme, given we all hope that school kids are going to be going back to school within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, the last question on the chat bar is from Councillor Tom Johnson. Tom?
Right, thanks, Convener. It's a very particular question. On page 22, you say that the staff will have access to network printer as necessary. It was just to bring up the point that around 2005, councillors were being given access to printers. And then I think if later on officials made a decision some 10 years later that we were not to get these printers at home. Can you give me a reason why we don't get printers at home if it appears that staff are now going to get them at home?
So I don't believe that says that staff will get them at home. Network printers are generally office-based printers. Right. So the primary driver for that kind of policy, Councillor, is to do with data protection. So what we don't want are staff printing off large volumes of potentially sensitive information at home. So we would prefer they do that in the office rather than have access to printers at home. So there are risks associated with that, and a network printer would mean that the staff member has to come into the office to pick up whatever they've printed at that time.
That's the last question on the chat bar, members. I'm referring you to page 12 and the recommendations. There's 4 of them. Are you happy to agree the recommendations? Yes. Thank you very much. Moving to the next item, and that's agenda item 4, a review of the absence management policy. Fiona's going to speak on this one, but just to say to you, like the last paper on page 52, I'm delighted to see that the trade unions, what they're saying is that they fully support and agree with the recommendations, which is very significant given the paper. So Fiona, thank you.
Sure. Just to reiterate that, obviously the change set out in this paper is more significant, and therefore the level of engagement with trade unions has also been significant. So they've pretty much worked with us in partnership from the very beginning at the outset of the policy all the way through to where it is now. And this has been a significant piece of work. It's a significant change to our approach in terms of absence. This is non-COVID related absence. However, there are some significant drivers for that. So if I just set out the fact that our elected members will be aware that the council has struggled with high rates of sickness absence over a good number of years. And in particular, what we've seen are patterns of increase around complex long-term mental health related absence. And therefore, the approach we have currently, we very quickly come to a conclusion that the approach that we have currently is not going to help us address that particular issue. So what we need is a policy and an approach that is going to support us to be able to manage that type of pattern of absence. And what I'll do is I'll spend a bit of time going through a baseline of the current absence data, because I'm conscious that elected members don't always see that on a regular basis. So what I'll do in the report is talk about the current absence baseline, and then I'll talk about the significant changes we're now proposing going forward to that policy to enable us to manage that baseline going forward more effectively. So within the report, if I just very quickly move to the section that has the data within it, is section 1. You'll see at table 1 an outline of a snapshot of what the actual data for non-COVID related absence across the council is for Q3 of last year. So that's the most up-to-date quarterly data we have. What we've seen is an impact through the COVID period on our rates of absence. At the top of that table, you'll see that we have an annual target across the council of 98 days per employee. And what we're finding at this point in time is the forecasted total at the end of the year is 7.33. So effectively, it's a rolling financial calendar year. So the end of our year will come at the end of this month in March. As at this point, the target was 9.98 days. We've actually going to have an outturn of 7.33 days. So that's a significant drop in overall levels of absence. The same pattern is seen for teachers. So you'll see for education families, our target for teachers is generally slightly lower based on their outturn, and the fact that there's a month in the middle of the year where they have no absence because they're off. But their rate of absence is actually half what the target is currently for the council. So 3.52 days against 6.7 days, which was the target we had set. If you just dig under a bit more the reasons for that in table. So where materially we would have had basically a 50-50 split between short-term and long-term absence. So that was our previous pattern. The number of days lost was around 12,000. That's dropped to 9,000. But that split between short-term and long-term has moved from a 50-50 split, long-term, short-term, to an 85-15, 16% split. So what that really means is that over the period of the pandemic, and we don't have data at the moment about the underlying reasons for that, but we've seen a significant drop in short-term absence. So materially where those figures have dropped, it's a drop in short-term absence. There's been no material change in our long-term absence. So that's swung the figures towards 84% long-term absence. So of those 9,481 days, 84% of that is now long-term absence. If I move to table 4, you'll see the underlying pattern, the underlying reasons for absence. And that pattern has consistently shown that there are two main reasons. There are mental health reasons and the bone muscle joint reasons. Now, bone muscle joint generally is more prevalent in the services where you have people out in frontline roles, which are more heavy outdoor roles. 52% mental health related absence is across all services. So between those two categories, you're accounting for the majority, and we're now seeing that mental health related absence stretch towards 50% of absences. So ostensibly the council's pattern of absence at this time is majority long-term mental health related absence. That's our current baseline as at the end of last year. In terms of our change, if I just move on to section 2.2, and I'll outline the main changes in the policy. The policy itself, and working with the trade unions, they have asked for a change to the focus of the policy and the title of the policy. So ostensibly the intent of the policy is for us to support attendance and deal with those long-term mental health related absence. So just to clarify why we've changed the name of the policy to support and attendance, that was very much at the request of the trade unions that we do that to convey the intent of this policy going forward. What I also then want to do is cover points 2.2.3 onwards. So you'll see in 2.2.3 that the policy now has an explicit requirement to have an early support discussion. And why that's there is because, particularly for mental health related absences, what we now understand to be the case is that sometimes those absences are avoidable if the mental health related condition or the stress related condition is spotted at an earlier stage in the process. So we're now putting an explicit requirement to have an early support discussion within the policy to allow us to catch those mental health related absences at a much earlier stage. Section 2.2.4 is probably the most material change in this policy. The council's current approach in dealing particularly with short-term absence includes dealing with absence under two auspices. You can either deal with it under capability, with it under conduct, And what we mean by conduct is that you are in fact disciplining someone for taking too much time off under absence. We think materially that's not the right approach. It's no longer the right approach to discipline someone, particularly where their main issue is stress or mental health related absence. So we're proposing at this stage the removal of conduct for short-term absence, and therefore any absence case will be dealt with only under capability for both short and long-term absence. So that is a material change in our approach. The next part, which is 2.2.5, then revolves around that single track approach of capability and putting in place a clear framework of absence stages for both short and long-term absence. So those are formal 3-stage processes. What we found when we dug under the current policy is that because there weren't clear stages for either short-term or long-term, and often the services were confused about how quickly to move through or when to move from one stage to the next. So what's been very important in this policy is to get that clarity around those stages for short and long-term, and the times, materially the times between the stages. In terms of the detail that sits under that, I don't propose to go into it now, but you'll find in Appendices 2 and 3, which is page 91 and 92 in the report, a lot of detail about what those absence stages look like, what the times are between them, and how the process moves through. There's also some examples in there what the impact of the new policy would be if we used it for absences that we've used for the current process. So it gives you a comparison, in other words, between the current policy and the new policy. What you'll note within that comparison, it is likely that we will be able to move through absence cases, particularly those protracted, more quickly than we are now and more clearly. The process is designed to allow clearer decision making with respect to where we're going with an absence process, but also to ensure that there are supports in place where we do move to a position where an individual is dismissed on the basis of an absence. So it's a balance between us being clearer and moving forward with absences, whilst also having the appropriate supports. One of those supports that's materially important is the concept that's contained in the appendices and in the policy of management discretion. So management discretion is the safeguard that allows us to pause particular stages. It's usually applied after stage 2, but it allows us to pause, and it's a safeguard for cases where there are significant complexities or mitigating circumstances that would mean we wouldn't move that absence case forward. So that is the safeguard, that is the support that allows us to operate this policy fairly, and to support employees where there are mitigating circumstances or complexities. In terms of the other aspects of the policy that are worthy of note for you, in section 2.2.9, we've had an issue in previous years where staff turn up for work, and then very shortly after that they say they are feeling unwell and then go home. At the moment, those absences are not recorded, whereas we feel there needs to be a change to that. We've had some abuse of that approach in the past, so this just tightens up our approach to where staff actually turn up for work and then go home fairly shortly after. The other piece that's been adjusted is in section 2.2.11, which is reasonable adjustments, and this is particularly with respect to phased returns. What we were finding with phased returns is there was no clear framework to set out what a phased return would look like. And again, we were finding that there were all sorts of varieties of what a phased return looked like. Some cases they weren't really appropriate in terms of a phased return. So this is much clearer guidance about what a phased return actually means for a staff member. In terms of the final section, which is 2.2.114, that is around implementation. So our current policy is only a light touch guidance note. And we do know that managers have struggled in the past to operate some of these policies effectively. So this is just to reassure members that the operation and the implementation of this new policy will be supported by a much more robust toolkit and a fair bit of support and training for managers to ensure that we operate the policy fairly but also effectively over time. So I don't propose, having gone through that in some detail, I don't propose to cover any more, but I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Fiona. Given the paper involved, a very detailed paper, and I'd ask Fiona to go through quite a lot of that with you today. It's taken a significant time to put this together, and there's been a lot of strong work done between the staff and the trade unions. And you can see the comment about the trade unions that they totally agree with the recommendations. Now, I've got, at the moment, I've got three questions. Councillor Goldie, Councillor Jones and Councillor Castles, and I'll take them in that order.
Thanks, Convener. It's just really a question on staff who have had to self-isolate because of COVID contact or that. Does that get included in the absence record? Is there a special category from that rather than sickness?
Yeah, what we do with people who are self-isolating is we put them on what's known as special leave, so paid leave. So no, we don't record that as sickness absence, that's special paid leave.
Okay, Councillor Jones, Jean Jones.
Thanks very much. I mean, very good policy, well worked out, but one of the concerns, and at no time is there anything about staff who are no longer capable to do the job that they're doing because it's a heavy job and they maybe had a back injury or something. Is there any opportunity for any of these staff to be redeployed into lighter jobs? Because I don't see any mention of that within the policy, because that allows some of our staff to continue to work for the council, have been good staff up until they're no longer fit to do maybe the heavy job they had before.
Okay, Fiona.
So we do, I don't have the data here, but we do redeploy a number of staff in that regard. What we do is we exhaust all other options for them to keep them in the job they're in. But where they are agreeable then to be redeployed, we absolutely do put them on a redeployment register, and we keep a register of that. So I'm happy to supply that kind of information, but we do redeploy people, absolutely. And that redeployment process usually lasts for about 3 months. We give them job trials and all sorts of stuff. So yes, we do. Councillor Jones, we do that.
Okay, Councillor Castles.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, I appreciate the whole tone of the report and the new heading that's on it. There's just one couple of little points just to get your reaction to it. It's just page 54 when it's used as the problem of absence, and on page 56 where it says unacceptable levels of absence. I just feel that's a wee bit out of tone with the rest of the report. I've got two other items to raise as well. One is on page 75. Obviously mentions gender-based violence. What happens if an employee feels that they can't approach the line manager? Is there another route they can take, say if it's something they felt embarrassed about approaching the line manager with? And the third item is maybe a bit more complicated. It's just, it mentions work-related stress. Historically, we think of that as a medical condition, but is it still the case that that is not seen, it isn't seen as a medical condition, or is that now seen as a medical condition? Because sometimes it relates back to not only stress at work, but stress at the home. Thanks.
Yeah, going forward, we're likely to work very hard to actually differentiate between home-related stress and work-related stress, and you'll appreciate that sometimes, in some cases, it's a mixture of the two. But for work-related stress, it's really important for the council to understand where that's happening, because it actually sits, I think is what you're hinting at, it actually sits under the auspices of the our duty of care, so the Health and Safety at Work Act, and the Health and Safety Executive will look at cases of work-related stress in particular. So we still have a duty of care to identify where that's happening and actually eliminate the causes of it in terms of work-related stress. So yeah, there's particular provisions that are out with this policy for making sure that we do not have high levels of work-related stress, because it actually is a breach of our regulations against the Health and Safety Executive. And there's just stress risk assessments that we must undertake as soon as we identify that that's actually taken place.
Okay, there are two other points there to Councillor Castle's questions. Fiona?
Okay.
It was about if someone felt for various reasons they couldn't approach their line manager.
I missed that.
And the second one was just a brief comment on the wording of problem and unacceptable, which I felt was a wee bit of kilter with the rest of the report.
So I'll note your point about the wording of that. Certainly you can see the underlying intent of the policy, so I'll pick that up and note that with my team. In terms of other routes for flagging work-related stress or indeed any other issue that you don't wish to discuss with your line manager, we have routes through our own employee relations team and our HR team to pick up that kind of issue. So we're comfortable that there are routes that the employee can go to if they don't want to speak to the line manager about those kind of issues.
Thank you, Fiona. I've got two questions, one from Councillor Graham and one from Councillor Baird. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Convener. Firstly, I'd like to, it's all positive, I'd like to compliment Fiona and the team for producing a progressive and enlightened policy to deal with a very sensitive area. Now, obviously, we need, in the challenging times we face ahead, we all need to go ahead in a partnership, and I'm very encouraged by the policy, the tone of the policy, as the previous contributors have said, and also the direction, everybody working together. And also it really fits in what the administration brought in 2016 with the Gorbachev era, a more open, enlightened and constructive approach with the trade unions. Long may it continue.
Thank you for that. But just to say, to reiterate again, there's been a lot of hard work done by the team, but also by a lot of staff, as I said, and the trade unions. But thanks for those kind words, Alan. Last questions coming from David Baird. David, Councillor Baird.
Hi there, thanks, Convener. I mean, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this process for, you know, updating the sickness and absence policy and procedure. It's still especially when it comes to 5.13, right at the end, it's abatement of annual leave. I've got serious concerns that really this is a change in the contract terms, because if you have signed a contract with the council and there is additional holidays through length of service, you know, are you trying to tell me that you can, as this would say, reduce that because of illness? Because my concern is that would also, if a person has a disability, would actually be in breach of their quality. Have you actually got legal advice on this aspect of it? I just have serious concerns over, you know, this mechanism of reducing holidays, which could be a breach of contract.
Councillor Baird, could I just clarify what page are you making reference to on the report? Give the page number, please.
Policy, is it?
It's 82 to 83.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I think that's a provision within the actual policy. So that is an existing provision. Just with respect to abatement of annual leave, what happens if you're on long-term sick is you continue to accrue your annual leave. So this is no different to somebody. In fact, we've had this issue with COVID, which we've dealt with, accruing significant amounts of annual leave as a result of not being able to take it, whether that's through sickness, absence, or indeed for any other work-related reason. The legal provisions are that we can abate annual leave in those circumstances so long as we give sufficient notice. It's not a breach of our contractual position. It would be a similar situation if you were not able to take your annual leave within an annual leave calendar year. What would normally happen is you would lose that leave. So we have a buy and bank system that enables you to carry over 5 days. But beyond that, people will lose their leave if they don't take them within an annual year, and that's provided for in the employment legislation. So as long as we give sufficient notice to someone, we can take. It's about fairness and not getting ourselves into a position where we've got an employee who's got significant numbers days of annual leave they're not going to be able to take.
So that's what that's for.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Baird. There's no other questions on the chat bar. Can I refer you to page 52 and 3 recommendations? Are you happy to agree the recommendations? Yes, thank you very, very much. Item 3 is the last of the HR reports, Fiona. It's the teachers' premature retirement regulations. I think the paper's here in front of you, colleagues. Have anybody got any questions on the paper? I'll just give a bit of time on agenda item 5. You've all had the chance to read it. Is there any questions you're seeking for clarification? I don't see nothing coming up on the. Sorry? Who's speaking?
Tommy Morgan here, convener.
Sorry, Tommy.
Apologies for not coming through formal channels.
That's okay, Tom. It's okay. On you come.
I caught the latter stages of the report that Fiona made on the 2 previous reports, but had already acquainted myself with the narrative of those reports regarding consultation with trade unions. When we're looking at areas like this, that is a priori, condition number 1, that we get the trade unions on board with us. In the previous 2 reports, the summary of the recommendation, and I've taken the words that it says, the trade unions fully support and agree with the recommendations. That is pertinent to items 3 and item 4. But in this one, in item 5, on the teacher's retirement, I see on page 97, I know you prefer pages, Convener, page 97, and in relation to that page 421, the text or the prose or the phrasing is slightly different, because all it says is, discussions in relation to the scheme as outlined in this paper have taken place. Now, it's not the same exact wording or phrasing, but is there nonetheless full agreement with the trade unions and any of the changes that are outlined, or all the changes that are outlined in relation to that specific area of the teaching job?
Okay, right, Fiona.
No, I can reassure Councillor Morgan that this is a standing policy. It's an SNC related policy, and therefore the unions will be in full. It's one we do every single year, basically, so they'll be in full understanding and full support of this policy. As I say, it's part of the SNCT conditions anyway, so it would be negotiated with trade unions at a national level. So it's just a straightforward application of an existing approach. Just to clarify for members, this request goes every year. It has not come to this committee in past. It's gone to Education and Families, but it's ostensibly an HR policy for pensions and early release. So it was felt deemed more important that it came to this committee going forward. So just to explain to members why it's here on this occasion, but it's a standard policy approach.
Convener, I appreciate that, and I've sat in education before and remember this coming on an annual basis, because things change in that area, as all areas of employment do. But if that is the case, to stop people like me repetitively asking this, I'm not on any of the education working groups, so I don't know if there's that full agreement. It's quite easy for an officer to put that in there to negate any incidents or any likelihood of suspicion in a member's mind. Why is that not the same recommendation, word for word, an agreement from the trade unions? It allays any concerns there, and then the report could be read from a different perspective. Thanks, Convener.
Councillor Morgan, I take your point, and we'll make sure as we progress further on that, we can pick up on that. Are you happy with that? Yep, okay. Again, as I said, there are no other members in the chat bar. The recommendations is on page 93, 2 items. Are you happy to agree the recommendations? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 6 is the first of a number of financial reports. Elaine Kemp will take you through them, and they're on pages 99 to 142. Elaine?
Thanks, Convener. The first report is our annual Treasury strategy. The Council produces an annual Treasury management strategy to set out the strategy, the management policies, practices and activities that will be undertaken by Financial Solutions for the financial year ahead. And the overriding aim of the strategy is to make sure the Council operates within a sound financial environment. So the strategy fully complies with the requirements of all the associated borrowing and investment legislation, and with CIPFA codes of best practice for Treasury management and the Prudential Code. The strategy itself is fully laid out for you in the appendix to the report. Section 4 ensures that increases in borrowing and debt levels are prudent, affordable and sustainable. Section 5 outlines the principles and approach to investing the Council's temporary cash balances, and the key focus, as always, in investment activity is security, liquidity and return, which are paramount in any investment decisions. The strategy will be implemented to help manage capital expenditure of 209 million in 21-22, and that comprises of 92 million in the general fund and 117 million across the HRA, and that's supported by approximately 140 million of borrowing. The impacts of the capital investment plans are assessed through the Council's prudential and treasury management indicators for the coming 3 years, and the loans fund repayment policy outlined in sections 7 to 9 show that the plans in totality are affordable, prudent and sustainable. So members should note that the estimates, the forecasts that are contained within the strategy are indicative at this stage, and they're pending the approval of the 5-year capital programme 21-22 to 25-26 that will be presented to Policy and Strategy Committee next week. So any material changes to the forecast will be reported thereafter through the quarterly Treasury Management Monitoring reports at this committee. Section 10 is a new addition to the annual strategy. It gives an update on the options available around the local government financial flexibilities that have been advised by the Scottish Government but aren't yet fully clarified. But including them in the strategy means that we'll be able to call on them if they are required. So, as always, when the annual strategy is presented, I make the offer to all members of the committee that if they want more information or have any questions on the detail of the strategy, then please contact either myself or Joe Quinn, who's the Council's Treasury Manager.
Thank you, Elaine, for that. Members, as we know, this is a very detailed document for the Treasury Management Strategy. In this case, it's going to 43 pages as such. I don't see anybody on the chat bar for agenda item 6. Can I direct you to page 99 and the recommendations of 3 of them? Are you happy to agree the recommendations? Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 7, pages 143 to 150. It's the review of the budget savings 2021, 2022, 23. Elaine?
So this report's related to the programme of work item around developing the budget strategy, and we're committed to bringing forward regular updates on the achievement of savings. This report gives an update at period 10 and shows the position on delivering the 3-year approved savings, which total 59.784 million approved as part of the 2021 budget process. It also gives an update on savings that weren't achieved in financial year 19-20. The savings target to support the overall budgeted financial position for 2021 is 31.213 million, and we expect that 85% of that will be fully achieved in the year, with the remainder in place for 21-22. Details of those savings that are delayed are given in Appendix 2, but where savings will not be achieved in year, it's a result of timing issues, and there's nothing of concern on a recurring basis. Looking ahead to 21-22 and 22-23, the report highlights 607,000 of savings in relation to parking charges that won't be delivered, but that gap, as you know, has been fully covered by the budget that was set on Council on the 3rd of March, 2nd of March. Within education and families, the approved saving linked to librarians within schools will be delayed for 12 months, and that's to allow for further consideration of the future operating model of culture and leisure services, so we can look at library provision across the piece. Any budget gap as a result of this delay will be managed within the education and family service. For completeness, the report also gives an update on savings from 19-20 that weren't fully achieved. Previously reported that in that year, services achieved 90% of savings, and that left a shortfall of 2.7 million, which was also achieved in year through alternative means and management action. So a further review of 1920 has confirmed that 1.8 million have now been fully implemented and achieved within the 2021 budgets, with a balance shown at Appendix 3 to be managed again in year. Although, a final comment is that although this report focuses on the small proportion of savings that haven't been achieved in year, it should be viewed as a positive report because it highlights that despite having set a very challenging budget, services are largely on track to deliver the approved savings, and that the Council is maintaining its good track record of delivering savings despite the challenges that we are currently facing.
Thank you, Elaine, for that report. Again, a detailed report there. I've got one councillor, Councillor Morgan, and you come, Councillor Morgan.
Thanks, Convener. Convener, just on the last point that Elaine mentioned there, and I sympathise with the department, we set a very high bar by necessity when it comes to these savings. We've still got a small stone in our shoe regarding financial year 2019-20. It's on and on and on, and we've just been delighted to see us getting rid of that. And on the small specifics in it, because it's something that we have to continue with until we work it out in the system. In the very black page, the appendix breaks down there what that 750,000 carryover is. We're getting into 2022, almost financial year, and these are for 2019. As I said, I know it's a toil and turgid exercise meeting these significant figures. But see on that one at the very bottom of Appendix 3 on page 149, a review of the PPP unitary charges. It would seem there's some fund that's been used, a sinking fund contribution is making that up just now. And there's reference there to a meeting taking place with COSLA, and it says September. The text then uses the word taken. It gives the impression that that meeting took place. Has that meeting taken place with COSLA, or has it still to take place? And is it more broad than just the small, albeit important, 230,000 there that's in the financial year 2019-20? Because I would have thought we were PPP unitary charges. It would be, when it comes to COSLA negotiations, we're talking about possibly reworking bigger figures than that. Or is that just the breakdown for that financial year?
Elaine?
I think, Councillor Morgan, as you know, we're very limited in terms of what we can renegotiate on our PPP contracts. And the meeting, I believe, did take place in September, and I know my colleague James McKinstry is also on this call, and he might be able to add something to assist you with your question. I believe it's obviously been difficult, and a number of things have been delayed as a result of COVID. But if I can ask James to come in and give you more of an update, Councillor Morgan.
James, on you come.
Thank you, Convener. There's actually a typo in the appendix. It was actually a meeting with SIPFA, not COSLA. The position with PPP contracts, as people are aware, is the PPP contracts were signed many years ago, and so the kind of service levels that we get are similar to what existed 14 years ago, for example. And there's been new changes in technology, for example, cleaning being an example. So what we've been doing is we've been looking to see whether we could drive out any efficiencies through the PPP contracts, but it is a bit more complicated than some other savings we have to deliver, because we have to go into quite significant contractual negotiations with the PPP provider. But we're still doing that. The discussion we had with SIPFA was as to whether was really for us to see whether there'd be any benefit for SIPFA coming in and having a look at our contracts. When we had that meeting, we concluded there was no benefit from them doing this. I think they were just going to tell us what we already knew. So we're currently looking at that at the moment to see how we take that forward through a different route.
Okay, but just for clarity, the question from the councillor is about a shortfall of recurring savings of £230,000. Is that going to be achievable or not? I think that's where the hub of the question is coming from. And if not, what happens?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is I can't say at the present time it will definitely be achievable, but you can see through the normal budget strategy we do that if we don't achieve saving in another area, we have to look for compensating savings. But we're not at the present time. We are not giving up on achieving that saving.
Okay, that's fine. That's clarity for that point, because we don't give up to try and make the saving. That's fine. There's no other questions in the task bar, the chat bar. So we're on agenda item 7, and I'm looking for your recommendations to agree on page 143. Are you happy to accept those? Yes, thank you very much. Item 8 is pages 151 to 156 about local taxation and benefit update. Elaine?
Thank you. So first of all, the report looks at performance on council tax and non-domestic rates, and you'll see that income levels are down on both due to COVID. Council tax reduction claims have levelled out after a sharp increase that I reported to you in the first quarter of the year. And we note that Scottish Government provided additional funding for councils to manage the increase in the number of people who are now eligible for CTRS. On non-domestic rates, the key point to note is that income collections down by 3.4%. The team is carrying out statutory responsibility to recover debt in that area, but note that it's particularly difficult given the challenges that local businesses face, and we are signposting the team, those in arrears, to the enterprise team for additional business support where that might be available. The report states in section 241 that it's expected that CTRS awards will again increase when furlough ends in April. But as you know, since the time of writing, furlough has now been extended to September. But we do still think it's likely then that CTRL awards will increase at that stage, but continue to be stable until then. The Scottish Government initially confirmed in its draft budget on the 28th of January that 100% rates relief for leisure, retail and hospitality would continue for the first 3 months of 21-22. However, it's since been confirmed that this relief will be awarded for the full year. But in a change to the scheme that was in place in the current financial year, businesses now need to make an application for the relief, and it was awarded automatically in 2021. Moving on to the Welfare Fund, previously reported that additional funding was provided by Scottish Government, and that's allowed the priority level on the fund to be reduced from high to medium. The main point to note in the report is that only spent just over 50% of that fund to the end of January. However, at the start of the financial year, the additional funding that was given to the Welfare Fund, it was believed that at that point the demand in the scheme would increase sharply, mainly again when furlough ended. But at that point in time, furlough was due to end in October 2020. When that didn't happen, we got confirmation from Scottish Government that Welfare Fund resources could be carried forward to 21-22, so that the additional support would be available to meet the increase in demand, which is still anticipated when furlough ends. So although we've only spent 50% of this year's allocation, a better measure is against the original value of the fund, and on that basis, to the end of January, the Welfare Fund was 82% spent. But by way of an update on the position in this report, the latest figures at the 24th of February show that spend is now around 87% of the original budget. Both community care and crisis applications are up to date, and the current award rates are 82.6% for community care grants and 74.2% for crisis applications. The spend on the fund is such at the moment that I expect the original budget to be fully spent this year, with the additional funding carried forward to 21-22 when that demand is likely to increase. The Welfare Fund staff are also administering the £500 hardship grants for those on low incomes and qualifying benefits that are required to isolate and suffer loss of income as a result. The Scottish Government has twice changed the eligibility for hardship grants, meaning that more people are now eligible, and additional staff have been brought into the team to help with this additional demand. But again, very up to date on that process. On discretionary housing payments, the report highlights the total spent in relation to the bedroom tax of 4.9 million, which is fully funded by Scottish Government. In addition, the council also received 655,000 in respect of non-bedroom tax related issues. And as a result of COVID, this was increased by Scottish Government to 898,000. But on the 10th of February, Scottish Government released a further tranche of DHP funding for 2021, and our allocation of that is now up to just over £1 million in total. As of the 31st of January, almost half of that has been paid or committed from the fund, but similar to the welfare fund, it's expected we'll see higher level of demand once furlough comes to an end. And again, we've had clarification that we can carry forward the unspent funding to meet the demand at that point. I'm happy to take questions on that, convener.
Okay, Elaine, thanks for that report, an important report as well. With that, and the chat bar, I have got no questions from members, so I'm referring you to page 151, and recommendations as members to ask to note the report. Are you happy to do that? Yes, I'm getting the nods from that. Yep. Next item is item 9, and this is a report on the annual oversight report for the LVJB, and I think a number of members have declared an interest at the start of this meeting. It gives an update of where we are with this, and I think the annual performance and the papers there in front of you. Don't think we need to go through it. It's again a positive paper, but on again item 9, members, have anybody got any questions on agenda item 9? No, I don't see any. So the recommendations is on page 157 to note the report. Are you happy to do that, members? Yes, I'm getting the nods. Agenda item 10 is a housing benefit performance audit, pages 163 to 168. A number of details there, and on page 167, appendix 2 links in with the link with North Lanarkshire. Elaine, you want to say a few words on this?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Again, I've brought this to committee because it's a really positive report, which should be noted. It compares the council's current practice against Audit Scotland findings in other audits. In 1920, Audit Scotland carried out one performance audit in Eastern Bartonshire, but also completed a thematic study across Scotland on housing benefits overpayments. So North Lanarkshire's current practice in relation to the risks identified in Eastern Bartonshire is shown in Appendix 1, and you'll see from that we already have processes in place to address the weaknesses that were highlighted in that report. A number of items for improvement were identified through the thematic audit, and again the council's practices against these areas of concern are set out in Appendix 2, but it shows that no further action is required from us in relation to addressing the improvement areas that were highlighted. So I really hope we can note that as a very positive position for the council.
Thank you, Elaine. Appendix 2 does indeed give us some positive outputs from that. Councillor Morgan, and you come, Councillor.
Convener, it's a short report, and I'd just like to get total clarification on what Elaine said there related to the thematic Scotland-wide housing benefit overpayment. Because on page 164, at the bottom of that, there's a summary of bullet points that the report found. And the report itself didn't go to publication, but it went to councils as a learning tool. I can understand that, various other things descending upon us. But if the report is spoken in general terms like that, and Elaine is saying that the appendix is saying we shouldn't be included in that, does the report in effect name councils, because those are broad sweeping general statements that are getting made there. The two bottom bullet points, councils are not following good practice. Councils are not applying relevant legislation consistently. I mean, it's certainly, it's a lacks decorum as well as professional etiquette for an organisation like Audit Scotland to make a general sweeping observation like that for councils throughout Scotland and generally encapsulating all local authorities. And what Elaine is telling us is that North Lanarkshire does not come under that. Our councils named that in that report, because at what stage should we get that specific information? But I do agree that the other appendix gives us some reassurance. But presumably, if we are mentioned in the report, it's positively and not under those negative items.
Elaine?
So, Councillor Morgan, no, the councils are not named in the thematic study, and it is unfortunate that these sweeping statements are made across the board. But to be honest, that's the reason why I thought it was important to bring this to you today, just so that you can be assured of our position against each of the recommendations. And as I said, it's shown in Appendix 2 that there is no issue within North Lanarkshire.
Councillor Morgan, I picked up on exactly what you said about the 2 bullet points, and I was very keen to know where we were.
Absolutely.
Linked to that, Councillor Morgan, and that's why the paper's been brought here to give you the assurance that in fact we fit in well with that, and that's covered under Appendix 2, Councillor Morgan. So
at whatever national forum we should be taking that up, Chair, the Audit Scotland should not be making statements like that, because they've literally damned every local authority under those bullet points. And I think we have to stand up to organisations like that. They do tend to be sympathetic to local authorities, but we have to make it clear when they're making statements, they're specific rather than general, because otherwise the innocent are getting soaked in with the rest that have got problems. We don't have those, so we should not be given any tacit or indirect criticism.
I think the point's well made, Councillor, and certainly I'll speak to Elaine off table just to discuss that and move that forward. You okay? Thank you very much. There's no other questions on the chat bar, so the recommendations is on page 163, agenda item 10. Are you happy to agree with them? Yeah. Okay. Agenda item 11 is the normal annual general debtors write-off for the Finance and Resource Committee, pages 169 to 172. Members, has anybody got any questions? It's a standard report, it's a standard write-off. Anybody get any questions on the report? Agenda item 11. There's nothing in the chat bar, members. Can you agree with the recommendations on page 169? 2 items. Thank you. I'm getting a nod. Thank you very much. Agenda item 12, and this has been a remit from the Housing and Regeneration Committee to ourselves. It's already been through the Housing Committee, and I understand there was a number of questions asked at that committee at that particular time. It's here to get the approval for the write-off balances. Has anybody got any questions to the report? There's nothing in the chat bar at the moment. Agenda item 12. Can you agree then the report, members, on page 173, 4 items? Thank you. I'm getting the nod again. Thank you very much. The next 4 items are to do with the first of 4 monitoring reports, and agenda item 13 on page 177 to 190 is about the revenue monitoring report. Again, a summary. Elaine?
Okay, so of the monitoring reports, I would suggest this is the most important one, looking at the council's revenue position. And the first point I'll highlight is there has been a significant change since the last report that came to committee at period 7, and that's reflective of the hugely complex financial landscape facing us in 2021. The position has moved from a deficit reported at period 7 of 11.859 million. And at that point, there was very little clarity around funding for costs of COVID or to some extent the costs of COVID. But we've moved to a position in period 11 of a surplus of 4.7 million And I'll take you through the main reasons for the movements of that. They're shown on table 2 on page 179 of your papers, and explanations are given in the sections that follow that table. But just quickly to summarise them, first of all, that you'll see a significant movement in education and families, movement of 7 million from an overspend of 6.4 million at period 7 to an estimated underspend of around $500,000 in the latest period. And that's mainly due to additional funding and largely limited to funding for the employment of probationer teachers that was received in that period. There's also a movement in enterprise and communities position. The overspend has increased by 1.5 million, and that's an increase to the costs of COVID across various headings, including further reductions in income, increased cleaning costs, and increasing staffing to support social distancing in services, most notably through waste, etc. In addition, the support to CLNL has moved, it's reduced from an estimated 14.7 million to 6.8 million, and that is entirely down to, or mainly down to, the extension of furlough. At the point where the estimate of 14.7 million came into being, we believed that furlough was due to end, but now know that it will be extended for the entirety of this financial year. There's also, we saw better than expected income generation for the period that facilities were open, and additional cost reductions during the current lockdown, the latest lockdown period. So all of that has generated a significant movement in CLNL support costs. There's also a reduced call on the contingency that was set aside for COVID costs to the tune of 1.988 million. Initially, 5 million was set aside to manage unknown costs of COVID, but that's at a point where it really was unknown. And at the last report I brought to you at period 7 reduced that figure from 5 million to 3.7. And in this report, we're now reducing the contingency further to 1.7 million. Funding for fiscal flexibilities or additional funding to be received is estimated at 12.377 million in the table, and that's a new line. It's been added to represent the fact that the fiscal flexibilities will be supplied to offset any remaining unfunded costs of COVID to bring us into balance in the financial year. But so the table also shows that an amount of 12.6 million has been earmarked to manage the costs of savings through the Change Management Fund, and this is in line with normal practice. We normally do it as part of the year-end process, but we're bringing it into our monitoring position just to add some clarity and transparency around the position. Finally, in that table, you'll see an improvement in the estimate for council tax position, an improvement of 3 million. And that's mainly because more council taxpayers are now eligible for CTRS, and that's been funded by Scottish Government. But also there has been an improvement in the collection rates following the reinstatement of debt recovery at the end of the summer period. Moving on to page 182, table 3 on that page is probably the most important element of the report, and it shows a cost of COVID of 47.9 million, and that's against Scottish Government funding to date of 36.9 million. That shows that the Scottish Government have provided funding for 77% of the cost of COVID. After the contingency set aside in last year's budget is taken account of, we're left with an unfunded cost of COVID of 7.918 million in the current financial year, with a further element estimated at 4.3 million going forward. Both of these will be netted off from funding flexibilities, although we don't yet know exactly how these can be applied. So over and above that, management action that I've described to you in previous reports has generated service underspends of 17.3 million, from which 12.6 is required to manage the costs of future savings, and that leaves an unallocated surplus which can be carried forward to 21-22 of 4.7 million. I would draw your attention also to section 234. On the 16th of February, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance made an announcement about additional non-recurring COVID funding for 2021, totalling 275 million across Scotland. We don't yet know what our allocation of that will be, nor do we know much about any detailed intention behind this funding. So, as highlighted in my budget report on the 2nd of March, consideration will be given to potential use of that additional funding at a later date. Finally, Appendix 3 on page 188 shows committee for the first time the change management requirements over the 3-year budgeting period, and explains why the 12.6 million that I referred to earlier needs to be earmarked. And based on current projections, it will be fully utilised by the end of 23-24. As always in the report for completeness, I show a summary of the position on HRA and adult social care, although these are reported to their own committees. The HRA is showing a surplus of 8.4 million, and that's broken down into COVID related surplus of 3.6 million and non-COVID related of 4.7 million. And adult social care provision to the IGIB is showing in period 11 an underspend of 2.6 million, although it is expected that this will increase further before the end of the financial year. And I appreciate that this is a very complex report, Convener, and it's due to the complex financial environment that we're working in at the moment, and the number of elements that have to be reported to committee. But I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elaine. As you did say, there's been a lot of detail in the report, and I think the point that you made as well about section 234 is important as well. Once we understand what the allocation is and the criteria for that, we'll be able to move that forward as well. Thank you again. I've got no members in the chat bar for agenda item 13. Can I direct you to page 177 and ask to accept your 3 recommendations there? Can you agree? Yes, thank you, thank you. Next item is agenda item 14, and it's pages 191 to 202. And it's the monitoring report specifically for the Chief Execs and other corporate services, and they're here for you. Elaine, do you want to say a brief note on this, or are you happy just to take any questions from it? You tell me.
I'll go through the highlights very, very quickly.
Okay.
Just to say that the service is projecting an overspend of 390,000, and included in that is a net cost of COVID for the Chief Exec service of 956,000. It's important to note that mitigating action to reduce expenditure has brought in almost 2 million for the Chief Executive service, but that's been almost entirely offset by non-achievement of savings in relation to digital NL, which I've highlighted to committee before, and that's due to the service having to focus on the COVID response at the expense of other work that we previously have secured savings. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Members, agenda item 14, do you have any questions? There's nobody in the chat bar at the moment, no? Are you happy to agree the recommendations on page 191? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 15, and again, it's a monitoring report, pages 203 to 212, about the capital programme. Elaine?
I've previously reported to committee that the Strategic Capital Delivery Group undertook a review of the capital programme because of the economic and financial uncertainty that's caused by COVID-19. And as a result of that, we have a revised budgeted programme of 202 million. It's anticipated at the moment that 59 million under budget will be our final position. An underspend of 22 million is expected on the general fund element, and hub campuses account for 8.5 million of that as a result of delays because of the pandemic, but these works will be carried forward into 21-22. The remainder of the underspend is around SIF projects, and that's because decisions about the allocation of funding were delayed until the impact of the pandemic became clearer and the availability of SIF funding could be reviewed and incorporated within a revised capital programme. That's now been done, as I mentioned earlier, with the updated or the new 21-22 to 25-26 capital programme being presented to Policy and Strategy Committee next week. Also within the general fund programme, it should be noted that capital receipts will be less than target, but that has been taken account of in our projections. The HRA programme, again, reported in detail to the relevant committee. It's currently 37 million under budget, mainly down to delays as a result of certain issues with Scottish Water and also the impact of COVID-19 within mainstream new build and council buyback programme. I'm happy to take questions on that report, convener.
Okay, Elaine, we're on agenda item 15, members. I don't have anybody in the chat bar. So members, I'm referring you to page 203. Sorry, members, about the recommendations. Are you happy to agree with the recommendations? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 16 is the last of the financial monitoring reports, pages 213 to 222. It's a Treasury Monitoring Report for the quarter ending the 31st of December. Elaine?
So the main points from this report are firstly, the net overall borrowing position to the end of December is 813 million, and that's an increase of 27.7 from the position at the end of September, mainly due to an increase in net debt of 35 million, made up of an increase in the short-term borrowing and a reduction on long-term borrowing. But I can confirm that no new long-term borrowing was undertaken since the last report to committee. I previously reported that the PWLB in December 2019 increased the interest rates by 1%, and that made it a less attractive offer for local authority borrowing. But during the last quarter, that decision was reversed and the 1% increase was removed, taking the 10-year borrowing rate down again to 1.25%, making it again an attractive option for the council if long-term borrowing is required. I reported also to the last committee that we had made a decision to increase the level of funds held on an overnight immediate access basis from 3 million to 20 million for the period of the lockdown, and we did that to make sure the council's cash flow position was protected, given that significant payments were being made following the opening of the business grant support scheme, and increasing the cash available made sure that there was enough instant balances to pay normal commitments such as creditors and payroll. However, during the last quarter, we've reverted back to our normal position and now again maintaining a balance of 3 million overnight, and that's in accordance with the approved strategy. The other main impact of the pandemic on Treasury management activity is that borrowing is lower than budget, mainly because of capital programmes not progressing as planned following COVID restrictions. So it's expected that capital expenditure will be lower as a result. And I mentioned already that the SCDG has done a review of the programme to reflect that. But for Treasury purposes, this reduced borrowing will result in a saving of 2 million in loan charges in the current year, and that's reflected in the revenue monitoring position that I reported to you earlier in this agenda.
Thank you, Elaine. Agenda item 16, members, does anybody get any questions? There's nothing in the chat bar at the moment. Okay, can we agree the recommendations on page 213? Yes, thank you. Members, we're moving now away from finance to the next 5 items is about land and property and whatever. We've got agenda item 17 on page 223 to 226. It's about Kirkwood Sports Barn, and I'm going to ask, is it Chris Sullivan, to say a few words on this one. Chris, on you come.
Thanks very much, Chair. Chair, the purpose of this report is for committee to consider the proposals to declare Kirkwood Sports Barn buildings as surplus to council requirements. Head of Asset and Procurement Solution normally has delegated authority for this. However, due to the objection of the proposal by a local member, this matter requires to be considered by the Finance and Resources Committee. Kirkwood Sports Barn was one of the council assets which was historically transferred to the remit of North Lanarkshire Leisure and the predecessor of Culture and Leisure, North Lanarkshire. The property was closed in 2017 and a report was presented to the Leisure Board of Directors at that time, outlining a number of reasons for the closure, primarily being the major safety and condition and fabric of the building and its impact and unavailability to be energy efficient going forward. Tin 2.3 of the report outlines at this present time CL and NL no longer wish to retain the building, and the Culture and CLNL board have confirmed this, along with the fact they have no plans to provide services from the building at this present time or at a future date. Tin 2.5 of the report, in line with the agreed procedures, local members within the multi-member board in which the building is located have been consulted by the community partnership team to the proposal to declare the building surplus to requirements and then after demolish it for the reasons outlined above. There has been one objection from one local member objecting to the building being declared surplus, outlining the primary reasons because of the building's status within the community, the potential community benefits it could bring to the facility could bring to the community within an area of high deprivation, but also outlining that funds could be committed from the Community Investment Fund being utilised to bring in the building back into operational use. However, the authority has not allocated any funds at this precise moment in time or proposed any funds through the allocation within the capital programme going forward. Chair, just quite happy to take any further questions on the proposals that are outlined within the report. Thanks.
Okay, I've got a nod coming in from Councillor Docherty. Give us a second, Councillor Docherty. There's no other questions at the moment in the chat bar. Councillor Docherty, you're on mute. Do you want to come in? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I feel that this objections that we've got here from Councillor Stevens is that's not founded really. I think it's more to do with Councillor Stevens' credibility. Last year, over a year ago, Councillor Stevens organised a public meeting for the people of this area for to save this building a sports barn. It was well attended with over 100 people at it. And during the course, well, myself and Councillor Gourley went down as members of the public to hear what was going on at this meeting because the report from the building was already out saying it was going to the council.
Apologies, Convener, there's a point of order being made in the chat bar from Councillor Linden.
Sorry, Andrew, and I see there are two other there, and my apologies, councillors, I did not see that coming through. The first point of order, Councillor Docherty, you need to stop, is coming from Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Stubbs. Alan, are you there? Councillor Stubbs? You're having difficulty with that. Councillor London, you're the next one. Do you want to take it or do you want to try and wait to see if Councillor Stubbs can come in?
Councillor Stubbs is having difficulties, Convener, with his connection. I just want to make a point of order in terms of the contribution from Councillor Docherty. I think that perhaps, Chair, you can tell me whether or not it is indeed a point of order around the member's contribution, which focuses on a member who isn't present at committee and their activity as a local member rather than on the substance of the report, which is about a facility and a decision on it. I don't think it's appropriate to make an attack. I'm sure I heard a mention of Councillor Stevens' credibility. I don't consider that to be appropriate in terms of a contribution, and I would refer members to standing orders around the conduct towards another member, particularly when they're not here to defend themselves or contribute.
Okay, Councillor London. Councillor Stubbs, are you able to come in? Is it on the same? Is it on the same item? I suspect it is the same item, Councillor London, but
Bob, can you hear me all right?
Alan, did you hear Jordan there?
I did.
Is it the same item?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, okay.
Councillor Docherty, I think, started his contribution there with questioning somebody's credibility. And I don't think that would be in any way appropriate, particularly as Jordan says the member is not here to defend herself. Really, Chair, you should have come in before myself or Jordan.
What I'll do with this, Councillor Docherty, I think to be fair, the two members are correct, especially the councillors not here. So I'm going to ask you to stop at that particular point, Councillor Docherty, because the councillor isn't here to respond to that. So I'm moving on. There's a question in from Councillor Lennon, I think. Yep.
Bob, my bar is not working. My chat bar isn't working. I would like to come in at some point. Thank you.
Okay, I'll Councillor Gourley, I'll let you in after Councillor Lennon, if you're okay with that. Councillor Lennon, in you come.
Chair, I'm happy for Councillor Gourley to proceed, and then I'll come in after her if you wish.
No, Councillor Lennon, you come in now, you're okay.
That's absolutely fine. So my question's in relation to whether or not our communities team have done any sort of consultative work in relation to this, Chair. Obviously, with a new community board structure, that perhaps it might actually be better sitting within that. So it's to see if any officer could respond.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lennon. Chris Sullivan.
It's not part of our process to consult with the wider community groups. It is only part of our surplus process to make sure that we engage with the local members to see what views and opinions that they have, and in turn that's why we're returning it to committee today, simply because of objection by the local members. So our process doesn't stretch out to engagement with the community groups as such. However, there has been discussions ongoing for various community groups to consider taking on the facilities within Kirkwood Sports Plan, but they've been unable to be concluded for a number of variety of reasons which have been outlined in the report, simply because of their availability and their stance and being able to run the building going forward. So none of those issues have been taken forward with any of the community groups at this precise moment in time.
Can I ask James McKinstry to come in if he's got a comment on this? James?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A few comments. I think you can see in paragraph 2.7 that there is a commitment from the community partnership team to review the existing community activities. That's an ongoing That's an ongoing commitment, because the community team are regularly in discussions with all communities in a whole range of matters, and this building has been in 2017. What I can also advise committee members is that they're aware that we have started opening up the engagement sessions on community town hubs, and we've arranged to meet with every local elected member across North Lanarkshire, and we're currently this week and next week, 4 evenings this week, the team are taking Friday off. They are having community engagement sessions with every community in North Lanarkshire, and indeed from some feedback we've been receiving back from elected members, we're going to be organising a 9th one very soon as well. So that discussion with communities is ongoing and is definitely ratcheting up in terms of momentum going forward.
Supplementary, Chair.
Sorry, and you come. Yeah.
Much that obviously I'm aware that the report highlights that the area is an area of multiple deprivation, and again that perhaps that this surplus to requirement is due to the fabric of the building and external cost factors that could potentially arise at the back of that. But I'm kind of I have a wee bit of hope here in relation to the community board structure, and perhaps that participatory budget may play a part in this. Again, I think that we're being very sort of quick to dismiss the fact that this facility, especially in this area, again, might hold no sort of future. And I would like it for the board to take under consideration of the fact that it could sit within the community board structure and the participatory budget, and to find a solution to this.
Okay, thank you for that. Who else, Andrew, is to come in? I've got Councillor McNeill. Is there anybody else?
Councillor Gourley.
Oh, sorry. Imagine me forgetting yourself, Councillor Gourley.
Thank you, Bob. No problem.
Councillor Gourley, and you come.
This building was structured in 1950 It was designed for change of facilities and a small hall for a four-a-side football. From day one, the roof leaked in the main hall, and up till it closed its doors, they never solved that problem. There was X amount of money spent on that roof and never solved the issue. The football pitch was actually a Nash pitch. It was also floodlit, which unfortunately through vandalism, the lights were smashed on a regular basis. If you look at the structure of the building, there was a report done in 17 which consisted a fair amount of asbestos in it. The company that done the report would not do a full report because they said they would need to erect a scaffolding, which would be costly. So it's not even a full report, it's a 40-page report on part of the building. At the end of the day, it'll show you in 17 to bring the building up to any kind of standard for usage. In 17, it was 500,000. Now, obviously, that figure has changed from then till now. Also, the running costs for staff would come into 16 to 20,000 per annum now. So at the end of the day, we've got to be clear on what we're doing. The building was only busy from 5 o'clock in the day to 9 o'clock at night. During the day, to my recollection, there was not a great deal of activity went on during the day. The people who wanted to take it over for a peppercorn money, unfortunately could not find finance to support that. So at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, it all boils down to cutbacks again. Do we have the money, which I don't think we will have because of the cutbacks that we've sustained over the last 15 years? The usage, I don't think would be substantial. You've got the time capsule, 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes up the road, which is 3 or 4 football areas. So at the end of the day, what we're going to put in that amazes me. It'll go back to what it was, and can we sustain it on the cost of running it again, when we know financially for years and years and years it was subsidised heavily by the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gourlay. As one of the local members, it's helpful to have that additional information. Councillor McNeill.
Thanks, Convener. I would just like to make the point that within 2.2 on page 224, it says it's estimated in 2017 the cost of bringing the building to the then current standards was £500,000, with ongoing running costs in the region of 16,000. Now, that was 4 years ago, perhaps. I mean, I don't think it's just not sustainable. I represent an area, as do many other councillors on this committee, unfortunately represent areas containing high deprivation, but we just don't have the money to be able to consider throwing £250,000 or thereabouts to bring these projects back into use. So I think, Convener, we've got little option but to accept the officer's recommendations. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor McNeill. Councillor Cullen. Councillor Cullen. I can see you, but I can't. Right, try now.
I'm on now, Chair. Thanks for that.
Right, Councillor Cullen, I can hear you.
Obviously, this report deals with the sports barn, and in my youth, I was privy to the discos and the boxing in the sports barn growing up in the area. Though the recommendations for this report are here, but I think Councillor Lennon raises a good point. These reports are brought up after consultation with local members, and sometimes it's difficult for local members to get out to the wider communities. We've got a board structure in place, and I think, you know, while we've got that structure in place and the idea around that structure is to try and involve the communities in the decision-making process of the council with a view longer term to sort of galvanise and support for participatory budget. And here the ideal they're the ideal platform to at least run some sort of consultation on local buildings that are going to be progressed to committees for being declared surplus. I mean, this report, in terms of the sports plan and any other reports, we can agree or disagree recommendations, but I think Councillor Lennon raises a good point. The hubs are there. They're attended by a wide range of different views and opinions from local communities. It's disappointing that this report gets to this committee without that level of consultation. It could be easily done. No, it's just to get their opinion on it. No, there'll always be opportunities out with that for community groups to put together a business plan to take on a building, and I'm not suggesting that the local boards do that, but at least run it past them, and that way we can get their views. And it would add a paragraph into the report that at least we've sought the views of the local boards. But a good point to Councillor Lennon, but I think I'm not taking away from the decision we need to make around the sports plan itself. Just one last point is, James mentioned hub consultation. Hub consultation is not going to get into the detail of local demands around local areas such as the sports plan and Kitwood or any other local community centre. They're going to primarily concentrate on what the plans are round about the town centres, albeit that there'll be satellites around that. But I just think we miss an opportunity by not using the boards to get an added bit of consultation and add a bit of detail to the reports.
Thanks, Councillor Cullen. From what I understand, I take your point. From what I understand, this building's been lying empty for quite a considerable number of years on that. But I know what you're saying. I take your point. I've got one more question, and I'm going to finish with that. But before I do, Councillor Logue come in just shortly. But Councillor Lennon, you've been in already. Is it a supplementary, Councillor Lennon?
Chair, listen, thank you very much. It was to see if you would indulge me with one final comment. And again, within that, obviously, I've got great respect for Councillor Gourley and Councillor Docherty as local members. But it's kind of disheartening, to be perfectly honest, Chair, in relation to this report coming forward, because again, we seem to be extremely dismissive of this building, and especially Councillor McNeill's inflation rising cost to what would be associated, its guesstimates. So the position here is we have a building that's obviously deemed surplus to requirement with 500,000 cost. But again, one of the key things in North Lanarkshire is we don't utilise external funding sources. We don't look at building capacity within community groups to take on assets of this nature. There is a whole raft of things here that have potential, and hopefully the community board process brings that forward. But I think, again, in relation to this local asset, Councillor Gourley made the point in relation to going back to the Daisy Ass football pitches, but I would bring Councillor Gourley's attention to the fact that one of the biggest revenues is football in North Lanarkshire, especially how good the football pitches and the state-of-the-art 4G pitches that council facilities offer. And again, it's not about the council running or operating these things, but maybe a hybrid model of the council and community groups working in cognisis to when we have a community group that has the capacity to take an asset of this nature on. That would be my final comment.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. I'm giving you a good chance to come back in there again with it. I've got two more councillors now, and I'm stopping at this. I've got Councillor Logue first, and then Councillor Hume. Councillor Logue.
Thanks very much, Chair. Chair, many respects, I mean, this is parish politics at its very worst. I mean, I hear Greg Lennon saying that the council has been very quick to come forward with this recommendation. I do not think we've come very quick at all when you recognise that, I mean, the building closed in 2017. It's been lying vacant for 4 years. Anybody that passes that building, what do they see? They see a derelict building. In many respects, this should have been demolished before now. I understand that the position of the service was in. The important paragraph in this report is paragraph 2.2, and it was closed, and it is iterated in the report for major safety reasons. Why would we transfer a building with major safety reasons in 2017 to a community group in 2021? It would be totally irresponsible of a council to transfer this building because of the liabilities and because of the condition of the building. Reference has been made to the hub. The hub, the proposed community hub in Coatbridge, is less than a mile from this building, less than a mile. And there's going to be considerable investment in that hub there. Mary Dooley also made reference to the location of the time capsule. The time capsule's less than a mile from this building. Mary Dooley talked about the usage of the building. It was very badly used, and that was part of the reason why it closed. I mean, the recommendations are axiomatic. I do not think in any respect that it does this council any credibility by even considering transfer to the community group. And if you want, I'm happy to move the recommendations whenever you're ready, Chair. You're on mute, Bob.
Sorry, I took it on mute because you were speaking there as well. The last question is from Councillor Hume, and this is the last question. Thank you. Councillor Hume.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just it was taking a while to come off mute there.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendations to say, in light of the previous comment from our local member who isn't here and other members, that this is an area of high deprivation, has been stated. It would be interesting and useful to give the local community the chance to discuss the position with this building. So I would propose that the recommendation is that the disposal is put on hold until the local community is given a chance to decide on what they would like to do with the building in terms of future investment.
Okay.
And also, we're talking about engaging communities, and this is a chance to do it. And it's also a chance to explain the council's rationale in a building and try and persuade the local community to agree with that, that if they had money to spend, would they spend it on this and something else? So I think that exercise is useful in its own right. So I would propose continuing this until a full local engagement has taken place.
Okay, Councillor Hume, do you have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Hume on this.
That's Councillor Lennon, yep. Yeah. Okay, at this particular point, I can open it for questions, or I can go straight to the vote. If anybody's want to make a question, who's coming in? Sorry, I don't see anybody. I see
to the vote.
Chair,
go to the vote.
To the vote. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote. To Jim, you're moving an amendment. Do you want anything else to say?
I move the recommendations. I would have thought that would have been the motion.
Yes, the motion is a recommendation. I'm just asking the mover of the amendment. He's moved his amendment. He's happy to go straight to the vote. Yep. Can I say?
I don't have anything else to say, Bob.
Right. Okay. As the recommendations coming from the administration, and I just want to say a number of things has been said about the building, and I think it's important. Councillor Lowe's made a number of them, but the building's been empty from 2017. You've seen the position of the cost to do it. The building is unsafe. It would never pass to a community group. The important thing as well is that there's a full commitment from the community partnership team to review the existing community activities within the area. So on the basis of that, we will be moving to the vote. Andrew, back to you now. There's a motion that's coming from the administration, and there's an amendment coming from Councillor Hume. You handle this now.
Yeah, convener, I just need to clarify who is seconding the motion.
No, sorry, Ian McNeill.
Apologies. Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Logue as per the report, an amendment by Councillor Hume to continue consideration pending consultation with the local community. So I'll undertake the vote by name. A number of members been in and out of the meeting all day, so I'll just need to check if members are in. So Councillor Dinesh Ashraf. Councillor Dinesh Ashraf on the call. No, Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Amendment.
Ed.
Amendment.
Bridge.
Motion.
Councillor.
Motion.
Councillor Burrows. Convener, Councillor Burrows.
Sorry, I thought you heard me there. It's a motion.
Motion, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Andrew,
Motion.
Councillor Burrows here. Sorry, just to clarify, there's somebody has left their microphone on and it's very heavy breathing. Can you please, somebody turn it off, please?
It's 2 people now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Castles.
Motion.
Councillor Michael Coyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Cullen. Councillor Cullen.
Motion.
Motion, thank you. Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty. Councillor
Motion.
Motion, thank you. Councillor Farouk.
Amendment.
Councillor Fisher. I think Councillor Fisher's been having some problems today. Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Gooley.
Motion.
Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham. You're on mute, Councillor Graham. Councillor Hume. Councillor Hume. I can hear you speak, Councillor Hume.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Amendment.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Amendment.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon. Amendment. Councillor Linden.
Amendment.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McKendrick.
Motion.
Councillor McManus.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeil.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke. I think might have dropped off the call. Councillor Reddin.
Motion.
Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Amendment.
Councillor Annette Valentine.
Amendment.
And Councillor Watson.
A motion.
Motion. Can I just check if there's any member who didn't give an answer earlier is now in a position to be able to do so?
Andrew, voting for the amendment.
Councillor, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Councillor Graham is trying to indicate by, Councillor Graham, you tried to indicate with your hand what you're voting. Is it a right, okay. Andrew, did you see that?
Yeah. Councillor Graham, if you put it in the chat bar, we don't normally accept folks via the chat bar.
Absolutely.
But I can see Councillor Graham. If
Do the YMCA. M for motion and A for amendment.
there seems to be a few problems with members coming off mute today.
Is there anybody else whilst Councillor Graham's trying to type that? Is everybody else is in? Is it? Is everybody else is in, Andrew?
Yeah.
Right. Who are we waiting on, Councillor Graham?
Just Councillor Graham.
Councillor Graham, can you type in the chat bar either your motion or amendment?
No, I think it's. No, I think Councillor Graham's having too many technical
Somebody do know
problems.
why.
Oh, okay. If
So-
that's the case, Andrew.
Yeah, the amendments received 15 votes, the motion 19 with no abstentions, so the motion is carried.
Okay. Item 18, moving on. Item 18, it's a good news report actually about a future house build for us. Agenda item 19, 227 to 230. The information there in front of you. If is anybody, sorry, item 18, Bob, Councillor Burgess, you've got a question. I'm just going to ask if there's a question.
Yeah, it's in my ward. It's a nice wee piece of ground, and I'm happy to take this recommendation. It's a wee bit of ground that should really come back into the domain again, because it's been lying empty now for about 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from any other member on this one? There's nothing in the chat bar for agenda item 18. Recommendations is on page 227. Can we agree the report? Yes. To agenda item 19, pages 231 to 234. Another good news report, housing supply, yes. Anybody get any questions on this report? Agenda item 19. You're happy with the report? There's no questions. Thank you. Can we agree the recommendations on page 231?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 20, pages 235, 238. Again, another positive report for yourselves. Councillor Morgan, agenda item 20, you've got a question, Councillor.
Thanks, Convener. It's a question that seeks clarification, and I think it's important to stress that I wholeheartedly welcome this report. It's in Airdrie North. It's part of the flats up at Whole Hills there, coming down in the whole housing regeneration proposals that are implemented, started just now, and this rollout will be tremendous. But I think it's important to ask this question at this stage. It might have been asked before, but if you could give me some clarification, because it's an annoying issue for myself when I see a report like this, which under the reallocations between departments, and I'm talking here about page 236, nothing whatsoever against this report that will lead to the regeneration from a housing perspective of the area, but under the reallocation between departments here, gone are the old days. We were talking earlier about PPP, when departments would just gift land to each other. The schools in Upton Land, it came from other council departments at no cost. That's historical. It started in Calder Crooks in Airdrie North, joint campus schools, planes, and rolled out throughout North Lanarkshire. Now, I was in various working groups over those years, and I can't remember substantial costs being transferred between departments. But when the culture changed, and the culture certainly encapsulated, and I need 2 points of clarification here. How do we calculate the third paragraph of that, where we see this piece of land that amounts to a football park, important though it may be, and it's been a headline value, I don't know what I mean by headline value, is 2.4 million. There are subsequent reports coming up that are land not of this size, bigger than this, but are getting, smaller than this, bigger than this, but are getting half the valuation. So there doesn't seem to be a consistent, is there a formula? Is there a calculation? Is there a method of calculation? How we calculate this? Because I'm a bit concerned that as we hand these between departments, and I don't say this with any accusation, there was a tacit consideration being given earlier in the financial year, towards the end of the last financial year, that housing revenue be considered something and transferred into general services. I hope it's not the case that some of these lands are overinflated in their price, and while there was no political approval to transfer revenue out of housing into general services, that this is a way, in this instance, for 2.4 million to transfer from what is literally the housing revenue account into general services, because that in effect is reducing down. Now expect a cost on it. Gone are the days departments giving each other land or utilities or whatever for nothing. But in effect, we're 30 houses down just to get the land from that department on a piece of land that's laying vacant for a number of years. What is the formula that's used? Is it consistent? And why, if it's consistent, Does it not stack up in comparison with other items that are coming up on this agenda?
Thank you, Tom. I think you're right. And one thing I'll say before Ian or James answers the question, I think gone are the days, you're right, gone are the days, and they're well away, Councillor. But Ian or James, who's going to answer that?
I'll maybe just want to start off and maybe hand across to you. And I would like to assure Councillor Morgan, first of all, there's absolutely no...
James, we can hardly hear you. Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Right, sorry.
That's better.
I'd like to assure Councillor Morgan and all councillors that there's no overinflation of land values done at all, and certainly if it's not done at all, it's not done for any purpose. I think as well, before Ian comes in, just explains the detail, where land sits in the HRA account and land sits in the general account, we have to do transfers. You can see, for example, through the capital plan, we've got a separate capital plan for general fund and capital HRA, so there's nothing being done here that is not in line with procedures in this council or any other council. Every piece of land is different, and I'll ask Ian maybe just to say a wee bit more about the work that's done. But I'd like to assure you that professional officers in the Estates team, professionally qualified officers in the Estates team carry out this work, and they liaise on these type of transactions with professional officers in the housing service. Maybe we hand over to Ian at this point.
Yeah, thanks. On the valuation side, each site is assessed very much on its own merits. When looking at the development sites, one of the first things we'll look at is obviously the land use zoning for that site, the proposed use. Obviously, the site we're looking at would attract residential land rates. It's something that the council's surveyors, who are also registered valuers for sites, deal with on a very regular basis, and we use a couple of different approaches to looking at them. We can use a residual approach where we'll look at all the construction costs, etc., and determine a residual land value for the site. But the most common approach that we'll adopt is a comparison method of valuation. Each site will have a full valuation appraisal carried out on it, and there are reports, internal reports prepared for the council. There's absolutely no overinflation. What the value, the 2.4 million reflects, is the gross headline value for that site based on market evidence of other similar transactions within the area, and obviously that headline value is subject to deduction of any abnormal development costs, which is also reflected within the report.
Convener, can I make it abundantly clear that I made no accusation of anybody overinflating a price? I am asking questions to allay any concerns that there may be overinflation and as James McKinstry rightly mentions, professional officers work professionally and objectively as well as subjectively. But so do councillors. Councillors are not elected for the HRA and general, some for HRA, some for general services. We're maybe not as professionally as the officers, but it's incumbent upon us to ask questions that allay those concerns to ensure that the budgets do reflect the actual reports that are in front of us here. I've had my concerns allayed, Convener, and it does no harm, I think, to air these questions because it does clarify cynicism elsewhere that may arise inadvertently and erroneously. I appreciate the answers, the clarification, and I look forward to the works kicking in up there in Airdrie North. Thank you.
Agree with the report.
You're on mute, Convener.
Bob, you're on mute.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for keeping me in order. You're absolutely right. We're moving on to agenda item 21, pages 239 to 244. the proposed sale of ground adjacent to Woodlands Drive. Now, I need to say, I'm going to ask the committee if you will agree that I need to change the recommendations. I need to add something to the recommendations. And again, it's to be consistent with the previous report. Within the recommendations, there should be a line that says, note the concerns raised by a local member. Members, are you happy to agree for that to be in the recommendation? I think it's important for consistency just to have that in there, because there's an item under section 223 about a local member who's raised some concerns about that. Yes, I'm getting a nod on that. That's fine. But so there's a third recommendation within there. Sorry, who's speaking?
Bob, it's Alan. Can you? I'm having real problem with my laptop just now. It's the council one I'm using. I don't usually use this, but it's the only one I've got at the moment.
Alan, in you come.
I've got an amendment that Andrew should have. I think Jordan has sent it over, because honestly these laptops are terrible. I think there's lots of one connection problems today.
Okay. Has Andrew got it?
The thing there, I'm worried that when you pop up on the screen, it's going to kick me out. If it does, I'll try and dial in on my phone and see if you can hear me. I've been kind of on and off all day.
I've also sent an email to all members with a copy of it as well. So I'm sharing that now.
So put it up on now, Andrew.
Hope members can see that.
Okay. Alan, are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you still hear me?
Yep, I can.
Right,
I
okay,
can
I'll go
see
for it.
that.
You might hear wee robot sounds. That's what the computer does every so often. So if it does, I'll stop and try. I'll try and be very brief, just because of the issues that I'm having.
Okay, on you go.
Go for it, Bob. Are you ready?
Yes, on you go.
Aye. In terms of, it was me that put the objection in, and it's not anything. I don't know who the applicant is. I don't, to the best of my knowledge, we've never met. And I do have sympathy with anybody that wants to do that when they've got what looks like.
Convener, apologies to interrupt. There's a point of order being made by Councillor Shields.
Sorry, Councillor Shields, and you come.
Chair, so sorry, I have to turn my camera off, or I think I'll cut off. Chair, I think we've been a bit premature here. Nobody really get a chance to speak before an amendment came in there. We should have asked for comments. First of all,
No, Bill, I'm not accepting that as a point of order at the moment, because that happens that people come in at the early stages with the amendment. On you go, Alan.
I missed most of that, Bob, but I'll take it as just to carry on where I was.
Yes, carry on.
I've got, as I say, I've got sympathy with anybody that wants to make the garden bigger. I do, but it can't be to the detriment of the general population at large. I think that the report doesn't go into as much detail as it probably should. When the application first came in, the local members were contacted. I had written to raise my objection at the time, and a few months later, the application was refused. One of the services, and because of the problems I have with my laptop, I don't have the letter to hand, but one of the services who were consulted did object, and the application was refused. And it was only after the intervention of a member of the administration that the application was then granted. So there's absolutely no mention in the report whatsoever that there were concerns raised by council officers, by the service. And the problem they had was the loss of green space, and that is still the problem that I have, not to mention the precedent that we're setting. I'm aware that the next door neighbour had done this a while ago, and the more often we do this as a council, the more frequent the applications are going to be. It's a fairly large bit of land. It's a good size piece of land for not a huge amount of money to try and expand the land that somebody owns privately. So I'll raise the issues. 2.2.3 on page 240 raises the issues that I raised in my initial letter. And on the first point about the land being gifted to the people of Coatbridge, the response is that they've done a title check and that there's no incumbencies on the proposed sale. And that's the point that I was making, and that's kind of answering apples with oranges. The point was the land was gifted to the people of Coatbridge. That is not in dispute. Just because the owner of the land who gifted it to the people of Coatbridge didn't foresee the council selling it off to the private householders doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. And the second point, it states that the land is inaccessible. It's not inaccessible. I know the land, I know the area well. So do many people from Coatbridge. Many people out with Coatbridge will travel to that part to take a nice walk through what is a beautiful part of North Lanarkshire, from the gatehouse at Drumpellier right up to Drumpellier Park. In 5.1, it talks about a capital receipt to assist the council's income, which is always very welcome, but where do we draw the line on that? We could sell the whole of Drumpellier Park. We've already turned a large part of Drumpellier Park into a school. Why not, on that rationale, just sell the whole of Drumpellier Park for housing, and we'll get we'll get a 7-8 maybe figure income and capital receipts to do that. The point is, it's a public piece of land. It's enjoyed. It's very much enjoyed by the local community and beyond. Finally, the third point in 2.3, I hadn't actually noted this myself, but it was only when one of my colleagues had sent me a picture from Google Earth there. It says, I've mentioned the trees, and the trees they're large, healthy trees as a wooded area. It states at that point that there's no noteworthy specimens. It also states earlier on in the report that there's no trees whatsoever on the disposal site. But if you look at Google Earth, you'll see there's plenty of trees. So if they're not there anymore, where are they? Because certainly when the picture was taken from Google Earth, there are a number of trees at the back of that. I'll finish by saying again, I don't know who it is that's applying. I have nothing personal on the issue. I am just fundamentally against selling off green space to enlarge people's gardens when it's space that is enjoyed and used by the public at large. I'll move the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Have you got a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second the amendment.
Sorry, who's that?
Fergus McGregor.
Okay. Okay, questions now. Councillor Shields, you wanted to actually come in a point of order on the discussion. Is there anybody who want any?
Chair, I come in again. You can see it's the second time to come in on just a comment on.
Yes, I see you. And you come.
Chair, and to a certain extent, I've got sympathy for what Councillor Stubbs is saying. You know, I mean, we all we've got a strong connection to the Drumpellier Park if you're a Coatbridge councillor. The gentleman concerned had approached myself, and again, yeah, the department had basically concerns about the selling off of the land. But I arranged a site visit with the gentleman, Sir Mr. Johnston, and Greenspace and their department. And as Alan said, it is inaccessible, Alan. I've got to tell you, you can't get into the bit that the land has been sold on unless you come in from Woodlands Drive through somebody's garden. You cannot get near it because of a burn. Now, anyway, moving on from that, we had a site visit, obviously social distanced, and discussions were made by Greenspace property and so on, and Mr. Johnston, and again, the connection obviously was made to a sale of land in 2016. Now, Woodlands Drive itself, I mean, it backs on to that piece of the land. Again, as I say, most of it is inaccessible. And if you look at the houses are about 80, 90 year old, some of the residents, probably people that were there years before those that own the houses now, have kind of adopted a piece of the land over the years. And probably if people looked at the title deeds, they probably find that they don't own bits of land that they already have. Simply because some people took it on because of the inaccessibility and the wildness, and they wanted a bit of a buffer between that and the usable bit of ground that is there. Now, in 2016, the neighbour asked for a piece of land and explained what he was going to be doing with it. There were caveats put in, conditions put in by the council, and it was agreed to sell the land. And a similar thing has been done now with this one. Again, I had a look at it. I certainly have no objections to the land being sold. And I commend the man for actually coming to us. If he came and just took the land, then nobody would have been any the wiser, and certainly wouldn't have a capital receipt for it. So I commend him for it, and I say I have no problem with it, and I'd be happy to move the paper at the end of discussions. Thanks.
Councillor Logue.
Yeah, following on from Councillor Shields, I mean, I think many people on this call will know the land, will know the layout of the land there. But I think the question for me is, I mean, this council has always prided itself on being an anti-discriminatory council. And what we're being asked to consider here is the same ask as was considered in 2016. In 2016, we agreed to it. So it's the same ask again in 2021, and we're going to discriminate. We're not going to accede to this request as we did in 2016. To me, the important points in this report are 221. In 221, it clearly says there's been 5 departmental consultations and not one department has offered any objection whatsoever. 223, it clearly outlines what Councillor Shields has just highlighted, that the ground to be sold is inaccessible. So let's not roll it up. It will not inhibit or prohibit anyone from accessing that area or going from that area to Drumpellier Park. I think the recommendations, as outlined by Bill Shields, are to be commended, and I will certainly be supporting Councillor Shields.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat bar. Sorry, one's come in. Councillor Baird.
Hi, thanks, convener. I was myself that Councillor Stubbs was alluding to earlier on, because I wanted to appraise it and see the situation regarding that. So I went on to Google Earth, and there seems to be a, you know, when you look and compare on Google Earth with the map that's provided on here, there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy. And it's just to ask that question: is this a sale in retrospect? Has the ground actually been appropriated before? Because the boundaries would seem to be a bit further than what's in the council diagram. And you know, if you actually look at the photo on Google Earth, you can see that there seems to be a lot of rubbish behind the boundary, but the boundaries seem to be in a line with the neighbour who previously bought the extended piece of land. So it's just to see this if the ground's already been taken and this is done in retrospect.
Councillor Baird, can I suggest to you that I think we all know about how Google Earth works and how it seems to be different to what we have at the moment. I think that we've got professional people within the council who've put forward a paper here. It would be inappropriate if that was not correct by these professional people. But I take your point about the Google Earth part. That's fine. I've got one more question, and I'm stopping at this. It's Councillor Cullen, and then we'll go to the vote. Councillor Cullen. I see you're trying, Councillor Cullen. Oh, yep, good. Yep. No. You're having problems with it. I see you're having problems with it, Councillor.
I'm in now, convener, thanks. Again, I find myself coming into this from the perspective of principle. This isn't party political. And it certainly shouldn't be taken as a party political vote down partisan lines. This is about the principle of, which Councillor Stubbs rightly pointed out, the principle of selling open space. Now, irrespective of whether it's accessible or not, do we as a council want to take forward a policy where we will consider selling off bits of our parks and open space? It's a policy I would struggle with, and I certainly know I could agree or disagree with my own party colleagues in this, and I don't think it's a vote that we should go down on party principle. It's not about that. No, granted it's only a small piece of land, and granted I take on board what the leader of the council said. You can quite clearly see that there's been a bit of land sold off in 2016. That doesn't mean to say it was right in 2016. That just means to say it got through a committee in 2016. It's where you draw the line on this in terms of principle. I don't think it's a good road to go down for the council to consider selling off parts of its open space. That's my own personal view on it, and it's not a party political view, and I can agree or disagree with colleagues in my own party on it.
Okay, Councillor Cullen, I said you were the last question on the chat bar, and it is. Councillor Stubbs, to round up, and I will round up on behalf of the administration. Councillor Stubbs.
Thanks, Bob. To be honest, I think David Collins covered exactly what I would have said there. I missed a lot of my computer cut out while Jim Logue was speaking, so I missed quite a bit of what he said, but I did hear him talking about discriminatory policies, and I don't really know. It's a bit far-fetched to suggest that posing this particular sale of land would be discriminatory in any fashion. David Collins right. Just because that decision was taken in 2016 doesn't make it the right decision. And if we take it again today, then where do we stop? So I move the amendment. Thanks.
Okay. Andrew, I'll be moving the motion, and Ian McNeill as Vice Convener will second that. Just to say that we've had a good discussion on this matter, and I think some of the points that's been raised is very, very important. And I think that in 223, Councillor Stubbs raised some matters of concern that I believe have been answered, and they're all detailed there by the officers. I don't think that anyone should be saying that because something was done once, it should be done again. But clearly, in this particular case, someone next door had got permission to do that. If anything else comes up at any other time, it'll be taken on absolute merit. And in this case, it's important for us to make that decision. I think there's been enough information there to allow you to make the decision on behalf of the motion to move the recommendation. And I'll move
there's a point of order from Councillor McPake.
Michael.
Yes, thank you.
No, Michael, I'm not taking your point of order. And the reason being, I've done a summing up. So I'm not accepting a point of order.
Came before your summing up, Convener.
I didn't. Well, Andrew will tell me that, and if it is the case, then I'll allow it. Andrew, was that in before I summed up?
Yeah, I think you need to accept to listen to at least hear the point of order, Convener.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take corrections. Michael.
Thank you, Convener. Now, the point of order regards what Councillor Stubbs just said there. He clearly said that his computer cut out, so therefore he wasn't in the meeting. So therefore he can't take part in the vote. So therefore the amendment falls, in my view.
No, Michael, Councillor McPake, I'm not going to accept that because the reason people can come in and out of IT system, and because the amendment was taken and in and out of it, I can't accept that. Unless somebody tells me different, I cannot accept that, and that's fine. We'll go straight to the vote. Andrew?
Thank you, Convener. So we have a motion moved by yourself, which includes the additional recommendation to note member concerns, and an amendment moved by Councillor Stubbs. I'll just now move straight to the vote. Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird.
Amendment.
Councillor Beveridge.
Motion.
Councillor Burgess.
Motion.
Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Castles. I think Councillor Castles may have dropped off. Councillor Michael Coyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Cullen. Councillor Cullen. Okay, Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty.
Motion.
Councillor Farouk. Councillor Farouk. Councillor Fisher. Councillor Goldie. Thank you. Councillor Gourley.
Motion.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hume. Councillor Hume. No?
Councillor Hume's lost his microphone, Andrew. He's gesticulating a YMCA style A towards you.
Is the committee minded to accept that, even though it wasn't articulated yet? I can see members nodding. Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Amendment.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Amendment.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon. Amendment. Councillor Linden.
Amendment, thank you.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McKendrick.
Motion.
Councillor McManus.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeill.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke, are you in the call? I don't believe you are. Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin is not in the call. Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Annette Valentine.
Amendment.
Councillor Watson.
Motion.
Motion, thank you. So the amendment has received 13 votes, the motion is 17, so the motion is carried.
Councillor Castles, if you can hear me for the motion. So I've been cutting in and out.
Okay, Councillor Castles voted for the motion. Just bear with me. So the motion has received 18, the amendment 13, so the motion is carried.
Thank you. With that, I need to say, members, I'm getting a bit frustrated with the roll call and the time that it's taken and the IT link. I don't know what it is, but it's rather frustrating. Anybody watching this live online must be wondering what's happening in the position with this. But we'll move on. We'll move on. Agenda item 22, pages 245 to 250. In fact, the next two items are both COVID contract awards. And the first one, as I said, agenda item 22, it's here for noting. Now, it's obviously the services. Are you happy to agree with that?
Agreed.
Yes. There's no.
Agreed.
Sorry, not Bob Burgess. You've got a question. You're on mute, Councillor Burgess. Yep, you're okay now.
Yeah, I was also on chat.
See you. I see you.
Right, Convener, just a couple of questions that has worried me throughout the pandemic. Can I ask what was actually procured, and was the company a manufacturer, especially a Scottish manufacturer?
Okay. Chris, James, who's going to answer this?
Convener, I'm happy to pick that up.
James.
What was procured was items such as face coverings, and all the companies we initially procured stuff from the framework. You'll see in the report that we worked with the Scottish Government. From guidance coming out from the Scottish Government, we worked with Scotland XL. We had to purchase some stuff off the framework contracts, and that's what's covered by this report. And both the companies are Scottish companies.
Okay.
But the question is, are the manufacturers or suppliers?
These two companies are suppliers of face coverings, but we do work with these two companies on supply of other goods. So we do.
That's fine. No problem. I just wanted to know whether they were manufacturers or not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. There's no other questions. There's a comment in there, but there's no question. Agenda item 22. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Agenda item 23 is pages 251 to 256. The very same thing. It's an award that's came in and it's in place. Agenda item 23. There's no questions on the chat bar.
Convener, Councillor Hume has, it was slightly just before I inserted the agenda item number in the chat bar. Councillor Hume has asked a question, but he says his microphone's not working, so he's put the question in the chat bar there.
Is the 50 amount not above the threshold? Okay, James. James?
Yes, the 525, which is the second report there, is the above the thresholds. And what I'll maybe just expand a wee bit on my answer to the previous question. During the kind of late stages of the summer last year, we became aware that we had to prepare for the second wave of COVID, and we revisited the procurement strategy at that point in time. We reported to the Silver Group within the COVID structure, and the contracts were awarded on the 18th of December, and we published that on the Public Contract Scotland portals. So we followed all the correct procedures that needed to be followed in that regard. And what we're doing is we're bringing this report to the first meeting of this committee since that contract was made. So we're following all the procedures that had to be followed.
Yeah, the question, though, James, is about the level of money, 525,000. Is it above? You can see it in the chat bar there. Can you see the comment in the chat bar, James?
Yeah, but we'd already received delegated powers because we were dealing with emergencies during the COVID pandemic.
Okay, that's fine. Absolutely. Okay, no other questions in the chat bar. Agenda item 23, can you agree the report? Yes. Agenda item 24 is a straightforward report here. It's a straightforward report here. It's here for you. Contracts with variations. Has anybody got any questions on? There's none in the chat bar. Can we agree the report? Yes, we can. Agenda item 25. I'm now going to move to exclude the public. Andrew, tell me what you're going to do now with the video.
So I'm going to stop the live stream as we're now moving into private business. So if you bear with me one moment.